a huge thank you to Tom and Grady, who put this presentation together for me because I didn't have time. So yes, so welcome. So this is our lunch and learn on reptiles. I just want to talk you through some of the most common species that you'll find in the UK, a bit about what to do if you come across them, and a bit about how to identify different ones. So this is the most common one that most people come across, and it's the one that you probably all know. So this is our grass snake. It can be found throughout England and Wales. It's a bit of an omnivore, so it will feed on anything. The most thing people find surprising with grass snakes is that they're really good swimmers, and you often find them near water habitat or swimming through water themselves. I really enjoy this picture. You should probably be aware that I have about 12 snakes at home and I love them, and they're a bit of a passion of mine. And when they make these little smiley swimming through water faces, that's it for me. That's great. Yeah, so if you come across one of these whilst you're working, what you will tend to find is that they will run away quite quickly. It is that old adage that they're going to be more scared of you than you are of them. You do get certain times of the year, especially when they are near their eggs, because it's an egg-laying species, that they can become quite aggressive and they will sort of stand up a little bit and look and strike at you. But if you're wearing your PPE, it's not going to be a problem at all. Yes, so smooth snake is the next species on the list. This is one of our rarest snakes. You do need a special license to be able to deal with smooth snakes. They're found in very isolated pockets on the south coast. I have never seen one, although I want to go and find one. There's clues in the name with smooth snakes. They are very slender and very smooth and they can be quite uniform in colour at times. They have a very, very specific habitat which they like to live in. Again, they can strike at you, which if you've never seen before is kind of where they dart their head at you quite rapidly. But yeah, they're particularly found on heath. I was very jealous of Springwatch this year because they were in the right region and they managed to find some. So yes. Adders. Okay, so adders are the ones that get all the bad press. They particularly in relation to dogs, and I'm happy to answer some questions if people have got dogs and they walk in adder areas later. You tend to find that because dogs like to snuffle through the vegetation, they do disturb them. And especially adders like to curl up in tree roots and things like that. And if you've got dogs peeing on trees and things, they do tend to encounter each other quite a lot. Adders like the woodland habitat, and they like kind of the moorland, heathland, grassland habitats. And that's where you'll find them. So sort of big areas of grassland, which is nice and tall, that has nice trees. So public parks are a good place for adders. My favourite adder fact about Essex is when they were building the cycle path over in Hadley for the Olympics, there was a massive adder translocation project which had a number of agencies involved, and they collected about 60 or 70 adders and took them over to a newly created reservoir on Canvey. So if you live in Essex, that is the place to go see them, over on Canvey Wick. And they're great. I think they're one of our prettiest snakes. They've got amazing markings on them. Yeah, again, I'm just going to tell you how much I love snakes, really. So slowworms. So slowworms are one of our reptiles. They're not technically a snake or a worm. There are legless lizards. They do have the ability to shed their tails when they're startled in the same way that most lizards do in the UK. These are the ones that people are going to be most common with. They're the ones that are in people's back gardens. They love compost heaps and logs. They're very distinctive. If you were paying attention to some of the photos, you'll see that their eyes are in a completely different place. So that's one of the ways you can tell that you've come across a slowworm. They are very tiny, very tiny. So you can have them sort of 2, 3 centimeters long. And I love that picture of the one that's in the hand there, because it's a really good way of seeing how small they can be. Right up, I've seen them maybe 40, 50 centimeters long. Um, I'm really lucky that where I am at the moment, which is based down at Green Park, we've got a very good slow worm population. So I do get to come across them quite a lot, which I love. So again, these can be one of the fastest moving snakes contrary to their names. So if you disturb them, if you pick up a log or you come across them in a compost heap, they will kind of freeze, but then as soon as they start moving, they'll dart off into the distance and you won't see them. Although the colours are quite strong on this photograph, by the time they get into long grass, they just disappear. It's really tricky to spot them. So just give them time, they move away, and you can crack on with what you need to get done. Common lizard. So I have seen common lizard in the wild before. You often find them quite a lot along railway habitats. They do like sort of dry stone walls, that kind of ballasty kind of environment. Um, they hang around quarries, which is where I've seen them before. They do like to sit out in the sun and bask, which is quite nice. But they are so quick. I mean, they will dart off away from you very, very quickly. I'm very jealous of this guy who managed to get one on the wrist, because I've never ever been able to even have one stay still long enough for me to take a photo of it, although I know that a lot of people can. So yeah, so again, I'm almost a bigger fan of lizards as I am of snakes, having kept geckos in the past, but snakes are my favourite. And like I say, the range with common lizard is all over the UK, which is quite surprising because a lot of reptiles won't venture off into Scotland because it gets too cold and the temperature doesn't stay as consistent. But yeah, they're all over the place. Sand lizards. I think sand lizards are one of the most prettiest reptile species that we have in the UK. The males in particular have this bright green colour, again, which they use so that the females can find them during the breeding season. So breeding season, April, May, they are great. Again, Spring Watch this year was down south, so they managed to find some under their reptile survey mats, which they put out. I think they're great. I think they look very pretty, but again, you'll find that is most common with most reptiles is that thing where they are more scared of you than you are of them. So again, they just tend to scutter off into the distance, and if you're lucky, you just see like a little flash of a tail as they scuttle off into the distance. Okay, so I've talked a little bit, especially with regards to some of the sand lizards and the smooth snake and things like that. There are a number of protections that all our reptile species have within the UK. So it is worthwhile being able to identify what species you've come across, because different types of mitigation for different types of work will apply. And like it says here, so you can get fines of up to £5,000 and up to 6 months imprisonment if you do come across them and you do deliberately kill them, or with smooth snake or lizards, if you disturb them at all in any way. So the best thing to do if you do see something is just back away. Snake eggs in particular are a distinctive shape from birds' eggs. So you'll often have ground nesting birds which create nests and you'll come across the eggs on the ground. Snake eggs, they're called slugs, and they tend to look a little bit like Tic Tacs. I think that's probably the best way to describe them, except for obviously a lot larger. They're sort of 2 to 3 centimeters. And they can vary in colour, but mostly shades of white. And that's how you can tell them distinctively from ground nesting birds, because ground nesting birds' eggs tend to be very well camouflaged to go into the background. So yeah, so if you ever come across something and you're very lucky to see something like that, it's always best to contact one of us in ecology to let us know. what you found and probably back away. So I think you've probably guessed that I am incredibly enthusiastic about reptiles and I love them and I keep them myself. Not, I should mention that the ones I keep aren't UK native species. They're foreign species which are okay to keep in the UK without causing any problems or any problems with invasive species. Um, so reptiles are brilliant. I find that they have a lot of personality. So you can tell when they're grumpy and you can tell when they're happy, and they kind of get sort of like a baby kind of milk haze when they've just eaten, which is obviously great. They play such a key role in our ecosystem. They're predators, which is great. So they eat a lot of bugs and maintain that balance within ecosystems. There's our UK native species and also a lot of foreign species, you'll tend to find that a lot of their venom and themselves have been very helpful in developing medicines and things like that. Yeah, so they're very, very worthwhile part of the ecosystem. And obviously for me, best day in the world whenever I find any out on site, it's great. So just to reiterate there, it's best not to handle them unless you know what you're doing. There are certain key species which you can't handle at all. Like I say, the slow worms in particular can drop their tails, and that can cause an open wound, which can make them prone to infection. So just stop, back away, and you'll get there. We also, sorry, I can't get rid of this box. There are a number of toolbox talks that are available on the IMS about what to do if you find reptiles. And if you come across something in terms of quoting out on a site or you're walking a site, and we can also in the ecology department put in method statements, safe working areas. We can send someone out to work on site with you who's responsible for making sure that the reptiles are safe. And it's probably, apart from nesting birds, it's one of the most common things that you're going to come across. So just in case you don't know who we are, there are our lovely, lovely faces. We've had a number of new starters in the ecology team this year. So things have changed. I've been here forever, so people probably know me. Paul's been here a couple of years. Oliver's been here over a year. Hayley's been a brilliant asset to our team this year. So like I say, if you want to contact us, we're all available. You can have a look. Take a screenshot of our names and numbers. I'm sure these slides will be shared as well, so that you can get in touch with us. And I think, yeah, if you're interested and you want to find out more, there's a couple of really cool websites that you can go to. So the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust do a lot of good work in the UK. They also have a number of leaflets. So they have ones for landowners, ones for concerned householders, information fact sheets on lots of different species. You have the government website, which is really great, which will tell you about different types of mitigation and when you do and don't need a license. And then if you want a good news story, have a look at the BBC. They're always full of good news stories about different reintroduction programs and how reptiles are thriving in different areas of the country. Yeah, so I think that is me. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to open the floor to questions. If you've got anything and you want to shout, or you're worried about walking your dogs in parks where there's adders, or you've found, I'll take pictures of ones that you've found in your back garden. You know, anything, bring it on. I love it.
Listen, question from me. Is there any specific plant species that attract specific reptile or snake species in the UK so that we could look at designing that into our landscape, if
Yes.
appropriate?
So it's not to do with specific plants, as in if you plant dandelions, you'll get snakes, for example. It's more to do with creating a mosaic of habitats. So reptile species in the UK in particular, because they're cold-blooded, they like to have areas to bask, but they can often be predated by birds of prey and things like that. So having that variety of short grass, tall grass and woodland areas, and that having that different heights and different levels is really important. So for example, where you've got hedgerows, leaving a bank of sort of grasses and tall sort of traditional weedy species to grow up is really good, as well as having sort of, we often find here at Green Park the reptiles like to bask on the paving, and also in particular on the stone areas which sort of are part of the landscaping which goes around the building. But it's not one particular species, it's that different heights and that different variety all in one place which you can build in, which is really helpful.
Right answer. Thank you, Alison.
No worries.
So how lethal are adder bites to dogs?
Okay, so with adder bites in particular, what you tend to find is that if you can get your dog to the vet quite quickly, then it's not a problem. The best things to do is obviously to keep control of your dogs. I'm sure you're all responsible dog owners, but to not let them run off and rummage in too much undergrowth, especially during the summer months. So when it gets past October and things start going into hibernation, it's not too much of a problem. But in those summer months, try and keep an eye on your dog at all time and make sure that they're okay. It does depend on how deep the bite is, how much venom the adder gets into, and the size of your dog. So if you've got a really, really big dog which just gets a tiny nip, the vet will just treat it and it'll be fine. If you have a Chihuahua and an adder locks on and bites with quite a lot of venom, that can be fatal. But for humans, you find that unless you all have an allergy to a bite from a snake, it's not fatal at all. It just gets a bit red and itchy. So I have been bitten by snakes a lot because I keep them at home. And if you've never been bitten by one before, I can describe it as kind of about the same pain as stepping on a drawing pin. So it's very noticeable when you get an adder of a snake bite as a human, and you get them sort of around your ankle-y kind of areas, unless you're rolling around in the grass. So yeah, it's okay. And like I say, unless you've got a predisposed allergy to an adder bite, it won't be fatal. It'd just be a bit itchy and annoying for a bit.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was a kind of, it did answer your question, but I did it in a roundabout way, and I apologize.
Thank you.
But yeah, if anyone sees any and wants to send me pictures, I'm more than happy to. I get a bit cooey over snake pictures in the same way that people get over cute dogs. I'm like, oh, look at his face. So I'll take any that you can send me. It will be great.
Awesome presentation. Thanks, Alison.
Cool. If no one's got any questions, I'm going to wrap up the session because I'm sure training will be happy that I've kept it under 25 minutes. But if you think of something, like I say, you saw all our names and contact details, feel free to drop us an email. You can give us all a ring. I'm sure anyone from the ecology team would be happy to help you. And like I say, because of the protections that they've got, we'd rather that you contacted us and we can make sure we've got the right mitigation in place rather than harm coming to a reptile. All good? Thank you very much, people.